to start with the recording? Okay, very good. So, today, hopefully, the presentation works. We'll talk a little bit about the foundation of the Hungarian state. Now, how far did we get with you? Was it the lifestyle of the migration of Hungarians? Yes, probably. Yes, and last week I also sent you a video about the arrival of the Hungarians into the Carpathian Basin. Have you watched the video? Yeah, okay, very good. Okay, so this is where we continue. Okay, the raids happened, and so Geza died, and so basically we have a new prince called Stephen, and he inherits this huge task of founding the Hungarian state, founding the Hungarian kingdom, converting the Hungarians into Christianity, and in general, completely reforming the whole country. Or, well, there's no country at the time. He has to create a country out of basically scratch and out of a nomadic tribal alliance. Okay, so we will have a look at the map. We also agreed last week that there are a number of things you need for a country so that we can call it a country. What are these things? What makes the difference between nomadic people running around in a flat area and a country? What might be the characteristics? Settling down, yes, probably. So no more moving around, no more raiding here and there. They need to settle down. They need settlements, villages, cities, and so on. What else? Something in common. Not necessarily. Think of Switzerland. They're very different languages, still they live together in one country. But I see what you mean. What do you mean? Can you specify? What do they need in common? Maybe common language? Yes. Maybe that's a good idea. Okay, if we speak the common language, maybe we can stick together. Okay, think of more official things. How can you, if you look at the map, how can you tell there's a country there? Maybe border, some kind of fixed border. Okay, so you need to define your border line somehow. Okay, what else? Does it need a lead? Maybe a capital, okay, somewhere where the leader would be sitting. If you think about medieval times, in the Middle Ages, which countries are taken seriously? Countries that have a certain type of leader. A strong leader, okay, but what should be the title of the leader? King, that's right, okay. Before the time of Stephen, nobody was crowned a king, okay, so he's going to be the first one who is crowned a king. Again, in the Middle Ages, you cannot just declare yourself a king. Somebody's support is important. And he's holding something in his right hand, which shows this power. What is he holding in his right hand? A cross, symbolizing religion, Christianity. So whose support is important? The church, okay? Who is the leader of the church? The Pope, okay? So religious support, the Pope's support is the most important political support at the time in the Middle Ages. So you need the support of the Christian church, Christian leadership, otherwise you will not have any strength. Also, do countries have smaller units inside the country? For example, if you have a look at here, do we have smaller units? Counties. Were there counties before this time? No, nothing like that. The tribes were maybe settling in certain areas, but they definitely didn't say that I call this Somot County or anything like that. So he will establish the county system, he will establish the church system. Did the Hungarians have written laws while they were migrating? No, so he's going to be the first one to write down laws, introducing money, coins, and so on and so forth. Laws, taxation, and so on. So basically, a country as we know it in the Middle Ages and then in modern times did not exist before, and so he's the one to establish all these attributes. This is why we say he is the founder of the Hungarian state. Okay, so let's have a look at in detail how did this whole thing go. In 997, Géza, his father, died, so Stephen becomes prince first and only crowned later on in 1000. His original name was Wojk, and when he was baptized, he received a Christian name, Stephen. What do you think? Géza, his father, was he baptized as well?
No.
Yes, well, okay, you cannot just say your country, okay, we will convert to Christianity, but not me, okay, the leader. So Géza had to be baptized as well. Well, he was sort of half-hearted with that, so he liked the traditional beliefs of the Hungarians. So he was sort of doing this Christianity thing, but also looking back into the past, into the traditional beliefs. But his son, Wojk, baptized as Stephen, was raised in a Christian spirit. So Stephen was completely Christian as he was educated to become a Christian ruler. So he was brought up in a Christian spirit. Géza invited different monks and priests to educate his son to become the first Christian leader, real Christian leader of the Hungarians. So Géza, on his deathbed, when he was dying, he collected all the different tribe leaders and he made them promise that they will accept his son, Stephen, as the new prince. And that was important because the tribal leaders normally probably would have chosen somebody else, and we'll see why. But Géza tried to force them to accept Stephen as the next prince, because he was not really the oldest member of the Arpad clan, so it wasn't natural that he becomes the next leader. But of course, Géza wanted to secure that the next leader will be a Christian leader. Okay, so we'll talk about these two traditional ideas of inheritance, seniority, and the other is primogeniture. On the next slide. So there was a clash in the ideas of inheriting the position of the prince. Now, just have a look at the picture, the statue of Stephen. It's a very typical depiction of our first king. What can you see on his head? Again, we have the cross, which shows religious power, but on his head, what kind of crown does he have in this picture? The Holy Crown. Okay, now we have to point out that although a lot of statues, paintings, whatever, would show Stephen with the Holy Crown, this is historically inaccurate. Okay, because the Holy Crown was only created as we know it today, and as you can see it in the Parliament if you go there, only in the 12th century, which is more than a century later than his time. But we definitely know that he was not crowned with the Holy Crown. He received a different crown from the Pope, and that crown was lost. So we don't actually know what it looked like or you know what it was. So we don't really have it. And the Holy Crown was only two parts of the Holy Crown were only received the end of the 11th and early 12th century, and later on put together as we know it. So even if you see this one, even if you would like to believe that it's a 1,000-year-old relic that Stephen was also wearing, it's not true. So there are these two ideas of inheritance, okay? Don't write down details, just the keyword seniority, and the other one is primogeniture. So if you want to put it simple, seniority means that the oldest member of the whole tribe, the whole clan. So the extended family, here we mean. So it could be an uncle, could be the brother, could be anyone who is the oldest member of the extended family of Géza should become the next prince. Now, at the time of the death of Géza, this person was Koppány. His name may ring a bell for you. He definitely wanted to contest the power of Stephen, so much so that they were fighting in the end, and Stephen had to kill Koppány so that he will not become the prince. So Koppány, as the oldest member of the clan, based on the traditional way of inheritance, wanted to become the prince. But Stephen and his father Geza preferred what is called primogeniture, primo meaning first, so the firstborn son. So it's from father to son, the way the title of the prince should be inherited. And that's something that is typical in the Western feudal states, in most of the European kingdoms. Normally, the firstborn son of the previous king inherits the throne. If a king does not have a son, then maybe somebody from the family can inherit, a cousin, an uncle, a brother, as it often happened in the Arpad dynasty as well. Sometimes the kings did not have a living male heir, so they just had to resort to other members of the family. Here, of course, this sounds like an ideological clash of the old traditional way and the new way, but I would say this is rather the choice of Geza, that he wants his son to become the next prince, because Stephen will probably follow the ideas of Christianity and will follow his idea of converting the Hungarians. Koppány was not completely pagan. He was also baptized, but he chose Eastern Orthodoxy. So he wasn't looking towards the Pope and Catholicism and Rome and the West, but he was looking for allies to the south, to the Byzantine Empire, so Eastern Orthodoxy. So there was sort of a clash between whether Hungary should belong to Eastern Christianity, Orthodoxy, or Western Christianity, Catholicism. So we may say Stephen stood for Rome and Catholicism, whereas Koppány was more in favor of Orthodoxy and the Byzantine Empire. For a number of reasons, among them that Koppány felt Orthodoxy and Eastern Christianity gave him more independence and not that much control as the Pope exercises over most of Western Europe. Okay, so these are two important terms that show the contrast and the debate that followed the death of Geza, and immediately fighting erupted between Koppány and Stephen. It wasn't just Koppány who contested the power of Stephen. So he was more centered in the southern Transdanubian region. Oitony in the Damascus region was also contesting the power of Stephen, so he did not accept Stephen. Stephen had to fight long wars against him. And also there is a leader called Gyula in Transylvania, who also resisted the power of Stephen and his power takeover. So Koppány wanted to become a prince. He resisted Stephen. If you have seen the famous musical about Stephen, then this is the main storyline, the fight between Koppány and Stephen. It took a few months to defeat him, and eventually there is an illustration here from the so-called illuminated chronicle from the 14th century, which shows most of the history of this period. And here he's beheaded, cut into 4 pieces, famously, and in different parts of the country, his parts were put on display, sending a message to people that Stephen has the power, and anyone who resists his power will meet the same fate. Now, Oitony in the Damascus region was defeated, but historians are uncertain how long this war lasted, but it definitely took longer to stop his resistance. And eventually Gyula, who was the head of Transylvania, accepted Stephen's supremacy, accepted Stephen as the head of the country. So by stopping the internal resistance, Stephen could concentrate on creating the country as we know it in the Middle Ages. Now, of course, that's a statue, a modern day statue. an idealized version. And well, we don't really know how Stephen looked like, but this is the closest thing we have from the period. What do you think? Where is this picture from? So was this a painting at the time, or what material was this on? Textile, yes, very good. So this is basically the only picture of him from that period. Okay, so something that originates from that period. So this is the closest we can get to how he probably looked like. So this is on the coronation gown, okay, which is part of the coronation insignia or the crown jewels. It is in the National Museum, so, and that comes from the time of Stephen. Most probably Stephen's wife, Gisela, made the embroidery, and so he, of course, she saw her husband, and so this is how Stephen was depicted. And immediately you can see that the crown does not at all resemble the Holy Crown, nothing like that. So probably this is what the original crown looked like, which was later on lost. So this crown, which was not the Holy Crown, came from the Pope, Pope Sylvester II, accepted Stephen as a new king in the European family of kings, Christian kings. And so around Christmas 1000 AD, Stephen was crowned as the first king of Hungary. Okay, so it's very important that the crown was sent by the Pope, and that that shows the support of the Catholic Christian Church. So this is important to point out. This is not the Holy Crown, that comes a little bit later. Now, also, Stephen very quickly established a feudal kingdom. Okay, so a kingdom similar to Western European kingdoms, which means that the king is the biggest landowner, he's the biggest landlord, and he grants lands to the different noblemen, soldiers, lords, and so on. So what we know about feudalism, that was established and started by Stephen. In the beginning, he owned most of the land, about 2/3 of the land was in his private possession, and 1/3 of the land was granted to different landlords, to the church as well. So people received lands on different occasions. So we call this patrimonial kingdom like a fatherly kingdom, when the father figure, the king, owns much of the land, as opposed to other types of feudalism where the king owns less land. A new jurisdiction system also had to be established. Stephen passed new laws, and he becomes the main judge, the chief judge in the country. Of course, he doesn't have time to, deal with every little case and every little problem, but as he was moving around the country, wherever he went, if there was an important case, something to be judged, then he became the main decision maker in problematic cases. He also established the Royal Council. In this Royal Council, as this whole Christianity thing was relatively new, he had foreigners as well, especially people from the German territories, from the Holy Roman Empire, but from Italian territories as well. So priests, foreigners from abroad who would come and give him advice on how to organize a more modern army, or how to create a Christian kingdom. But of course, he would include Hungarian tribal leaders as well, so he would not curb their rights. He also established a title, a position called the Palatine, and basically from this moment on, up until the 19th century, we have this position, as long as we have a kingdom in Hungary. The Palatine's main role is to substitute for the king. So for example, if the king goes fighting somewhere, or the king is not in the capital, which was Székesfehérvár at the time, or somewhere away or sick, then the Palatine is in charge of the countries, sort of a deputy, okay, like a vice president. Okay, and in Hungarian we call this nádor or nádorispan. All right. So we mentioned that having Christianity is the next big step towards organizing a medieval kingdom, organizing a medieval country. So the church organization was established. You can see the map here, and you can see the different territorial units. Now, you don't have to count them, because I will tell you that there are altogether 10 territorial units. These are called bishoprics. Of course, who is the leader of a bishopric? A bishop. Okay? These bishoprics can also be called dioceses. And 2 out of the 10 bishoprics have a higher rank, have a more sort of a leading position. These are called archbishoprics or archdioceses. And of course, even today, the head of the Hungarian church resides in Esztergom, and the other archbishoprics was in Holochok, which is down here, so this area. So if we want to translate bishopric, or bishop? Yes? No, that's the other one. So archbishoprics is érsekség, and this one is püspök and püspökség. Okay? So bishoprics is the territorial unit, bishop is the person leading that one. So how many bishops do we have in Hungary at the time? How many bishops? 10 altogether, but 2 of them are also archbishops. Okay? So you may just say 8 bishops and 2 archbishops, but the archbishops are also bishops at the same time. All right, so the church system was established. In the beginning, do we have Hungarian priests? Are there Hungarian priests? No, not really. Okay, so it will take some time before there are Hungarian priests. So what Géza and Stephen did was to invite foreigners, to invite priests, missionaries from other countries, and so they started spreading Christianity in Hungary because they already knew about it. So first they had to teach the Hungarians about Christianity. Now, it's also very important that we have 2 archbishoprics. Some countries do not have archbishoprics, and some smaller territories do not have that one. So those territories belong to some other archbishoprics under the supremacy of somebody else. So it's good because the Hungarian church was not under the supervision of the Holy Roman Empire. The next in line was the Pope. So the 2 Hungarian archbishops only had to report, and were only sort of ruled by the Pope. And that gives the Hungarian church a certain independence. Okay, now also the first monasteries were established all around the country. Monasteries started to spring up. The very first one was in Pannonhalma, established by Géza, and when he died, Stephen continued with the establishment. But we traditionally say in 996, the first monastery in Pannonhalma was established. And then, of course, later on, many monasteries followed. All these helped in establishing Christianity in the country. So here you can see the foundation charter of the monastery of Pannonhalma. So the Alapító oklevél, I may translate it that way. And interesting bit on the document is the signature of Stephen. Okay, it was not like signature like today, but something more sort of enigmatic and calligraphic and nice. So can you see the letters? So how the name is made up? Of course, you can see the S. Okay, and of course in Latin it's not Stephen but Stephanus. Okay, with a PH. Can you see all the letters in this? Can you see a T? Yep. Okay. Can you see it? Can you see an E? the right side. Okay. P up here. Okay. And so on. So we would probably find the A, the N, okay, and the V is for U. So and the S in the middle. So that's the if you see this one, this is the signature of Saint Stephen on the foundation charter of the monastery of Pannonhalma. Now Pannonhalma probably looked like this in the Middle Ages. So it was on top of Sedmakon hill. Does it exist today? Have you ever been to Pannonhalma? Is it still functioning monastery? No idea. It's next to, it's close to Europe, so it's in that region. So if you ever go there, you can actually visit it because it still exists. Okay? So like 1,000 years after the establishment, it's still the same place. Of course, many of the buildings were rebuilt. And there is also a school inside. So somebody would like to live and study in the monastery, they can. So like students of your age can study there. Also, it has a beautiful library, and it's a functioning monastery. So monks actually live there, and monks teach the students. Of course, they today have a football pitch, which is sort of being more modern. Okay, very good. Now we need your maps. So please open the maps at a page which shows the counties, okay, and also the bishoprics. So try to find a map which shows Hungary at the time of Saint Stephen. Okay. So that should be page, I would say page 15. Page 15, okay. And first of all, here we have the 10 bishoprics. So just tell me centers, and of course the centers will tell you the name of the bishopric. So let's just go around. Let's start with Victor. Just tell me a center, a bishopric center. Yes, very good. So it's more like Transylvania and good. Right? Tell me a bishopric center. So if you have a look at the legend, it says, Első Püspöki székhely. Most for the second one, if you look for the second symbol. Bihon, yes, very good. That's one of the bishopric centers. We already had that one. Bach, very good, which is also, interestingly, an archbishopric center. Pécs, yes. Culture, yeah, that's right. And that was also an archbishopric center. So if you have a look at Pécs, Culture, Csanád, Bihon, Eger, Esztergom, Vác, Győr. So these are the 10 bishopric centers, and 2 of them, Esztergom and Culture, were archbishoprics as well. Can you also see the counties? They're on the same map. So counties, which are slightly different from the bishoprics. So what is the county names? What is the color of the county names? Black, okay? So the things written in black, they are not the name of the bishoprics, but they are the names of the counties. In Hungarian, they are the vármegyek, okay? And they also have different centers. What do you think? Of which do we have more, counties or bishoprics? Counties, that's right. So there are a lot more counties. Typically, they are smaller units, and the bishoprics are a lot bigger. You can see the red sort of lines that show the different borders of the bishoprics. Okay, so sometimes they overlap, sometimes not, but these are 2 different territorial systems. One is the bishopric system, the church system. The other is the worldly territorial unit, the counties. Okay, of course here you have those. So the county system was also established. How does that look like? They are administrative units They are not headed by church officials like bishops, priests, whatever, but they're headed by soldiers, soldiers of the king, and the center of each of these is a castle. So definitely this has protective tasks, so they have to protect the neighboring area. Also, this is the place where they collect all the food and all the tax and everything. In the beginning, you shouldn't imagine this as something big like a medieval fortress or a big castle or anything. Very often, they would just have a small area, maybe with some wooden fortification around it. And so this was like the beginning of the centers. And this is where they collected the food and all the tax, and the soldiers were inside, and they kept an eye on the neighboring area. The king was moving around a lot, so he went from county to county to make sure everything's going all right. When he arrived into one of these centers, he would arrive with his soldiers, discuss matters, and also consume much of the food there, and then go on to the next place. So each county had a center. You can see these black rectangles. These are different county centers, like Zalavár, Somogyvár, Tolna, Baranyavár. So most of these have Vár in their name. Now the leader of each county was the bailiff, or in Hungarian, Ispán, and that person was always appointed by the king. So if you wanted to become a leader of a county, then you have to be on good terms with the king. Also, the bailiff recruited a number of soldiers. Interestingly, these soldiers were called várjobbágyok, and you may stop for a moment and say, wait a minute, these are soldiers, so why are they called jobbágyok? Aren't they the serfs, people working on the land, farmlands? The word jobbágy also means to serve. So very often, any kind of person who would serve the king in any way, maybe with military service, would be called this. Okay, so várjobbágyok in this sense means the soldiers in the castle or the center of the county. So we can translate their names as castle servants. And people who were living near the castle were called the castle people, or várni. They were doing the work, they were producing, collecting food from the farmlands, and very often they would be living in the villages nearby and not necessarily inside the castle. And of course, as years progressed, these areas became bigger and bigger. They grew into towns with big city walls, bigger fortified castles, big watchtowers, and so on and so forth. In the very beginning, they started out as smaller settlements in this period. Okay, good. So this is what it might look like. All right, now we mentioned money is important to have your own currency. In the beginning, the Hungarians were using coins and money they got from other countries. So they used full Roman Empire's money and Frankish money and Byzantine Empire's money, and so whatever they could get hold of, or when they were trading with somebody, they received all these coins. So a lot of different coins were in circulation in Hungary, but Stephen felt it's necessary to mint, to create his own coins, with of course his own hand on it. Now you may or may not be able to read this, but this is Stephanus and Rex. Rex means king in Latin. Okay? So basically, King Stephen is written in that. And interestingly, this is the first golden money. And for quite some time, the kings didn't really issue golden money because it was just too expensive and not useful in everyday exchanges. And he also introduced silver dinar. Now, solidus and dinar, these are coin names that come from Roman times. Okay? They also use similar ones, but all around Europe, this sort of Roman type money minting was kind of much sort of popular. He didn't really mint a lot of money, so it was not used by everybody, especially not by the poor people. but this is the very first sort of quite stable money, and it was used in other countries as well. Archaeologists found, even in faraway Scandinavia, some of the original coins of Stephen, which showed it was a popular currency, so people were happy to use it in other countries as well, stable golden content. Now, as for society, what kind of social layers were there in this period? Of course, the king is on top of the social hierarchy. A sort of an upper layer developed, and this became quite diverse. In the nomadic period, we have the tribe leaders and their families, they are the upper layer. Now we have new positions. So somebody could become member of the elite by gaining some title, by getting some position. For example, if you became the palatine, of course, a deputy to the king, then you and your family belong to the uppermost stratum of society. Bishops, okay, if you receive the title of a bishop, then you received a lot of land and a lot of power, so these were important people. Priests also belong to that layer, but the tribal leaders did not disappear from one decade to the other, so they were still important. They turned into feudal lords. And the foreign knights were respected very much by Stephen because they brought a new fighting style, a new culture into Hungary. So they also received big land grants very often. Then the next big layer of society are the freemen, people who were mostly soldiers in the military of the king. For example, the variobarek in the castles were also considered freemen. Then we have the servants, who basically do the hard work. People who work on the lands, basically people we will call later on serfs. And interestingly enough, we still have slaves in this period. During the nomadic period, the Hungarians very often took prisoners, and these prisoners became slaves. So they could be sold, just like in Roman times, in ancient times. So this practice still existed in the time of Stephen. Gradually, it will disappear, and slaves will become just like ordinary farmers or serfs. But in the 10th, 11th century, we still see slavery existing at the time. And of course, you could break it down into a lot of other different things, people having different roles in the household of Stephen, and so on and so forth. So you can see that a quite complex hierarchy of society appeared, something similar to Western European kingdoms, where you would have social ranks and different titles and position in the feudal chain. Okay, now the low code, we probably won't have time for this time. So next time we'll have a look at the low codes of Stephen, because he is the first king and, well, the first leader of the Hungarians who took the pains of writing down actually laws. So these are the first written laws of Hungary. So that goes back 1,000 years. Before that, Hungary did not have, or the Hungarians did not have any sort of written laws. So this is the very, very first time we have laws written down. And of course, these are important sources of history. We can get to know a lot of interesting things about the life of Hungarians at the time, what was allowed, what was not allowed. If there's a law against something, people probably do it. Yes, if it had to be written down that don't do this, probably people were doing it. So we should read this like that. If it was forbidden, probably people were still doing stuff like that. For example, if somewhere smoking is forbidden, then probably people would like to do it. So this is why you need to ban it. Okay, so that tells us a lot about the life of Hungarians at the time and the problems the king was facing. Okay, good. So we'll stop here and there, and next time we'll have a look at how the reign of Stephen went on.
with other aspects. Okay, very good. So see you next time.